Good evening, good afternoon, whenever you are listening to this. This is the Varside Spurs podcast, and today it's just the two of us. It's me and my good friend Rich. How are you doing, mate?
I'm all right, mate. How are you faring?
Yeah, holding up. As we've just been discussing, we just done a bit of a therapy session there, didn't we, before we started?
We could have our own medical podcast at the minute as well, couldn't we?
Yeah. I suppose we better get cracking on this eventful, interesting Marseille game.
Yeah. Quite evening in, weren't it?
Yeah. So, just thoughts on that first half, Rich. I don't know if you managed to see it, but what were your thoughts on the game, the tactics?
Yeah, I did see the game. Strangely enough, I listened to it live on the radio because I was working on the boat. People that follow me will know I've moved on to a half-built narrowboat. So I was desperately fitting electrical stuff the evening. Probably not the safest thing to do when Spurs are playing. So I listened to it on the radio live. And then later when I made things work, I watched it back. So it's really interesting because I've got sort of two different perspectives on the match, because the radio commentary often doesn't really match up to what you're watching when you see it. The first half, I've said this before, and I don't want to claim to be too far ahead of the curve on this, but I know listening to other pods and reading other commentary now that other people are starting to say it as well, that this is clearly the tactic, the energy conservation tactic, and allow them to punch themselves out and come out, within touching distance at the start of the second 45 and actually play football. And it was fucking horrific to listen to. The only players I heard on the radio commentary live of ours having anything to do with the ball at all were Lloris, Dyer, Davis, and the phrase "Sessegnon's lost it again." So it was a pretty dire half to listen to.
It was horrible, mate. I must admit, it was a game that when I watched it, I thought, oh no, not again. I do. It does follow suit with what you're just saying, but I was like messaging other people, and even I'm pretty sure I put a tweet out as well at the time. But I was thinking, I don't know how much more I can take of this. In terms of the first half, it felt fucking awful. It's a slog. If it is tactics, it's a dangerous game, and also it just makes you feel like that. Where are they? Why aren't they waking up? Why aren't they pressing? Why are we being so lethargic? I've got to say, even at one point, I was even questioning Conte. I was thinking, is he the right man? Because the way we've started the game and the way that first half panned out, it was dreadful. But we've seen it time and time again, and we seem to be pretty good at turning these things around at the moment. But I tell you what, it's a fucking difficult watch.
It is, and I'll give a nod to Andy of this pod, who I know on the WhatsApp that evening said that this was like Mourinho, but a shade worse. In fact, he used language that was a little bit more strident than that. But there was a lot of that about it. I guess the funny thing was that I listened to it live and it sounded horrendous. But when I watched it back, obviously I knew we'd won when I watched it. And so I was watching it without the jeopardy. That struck me was that although it is terrible to watch and see live, and it's not entertaining football by any means, when you watch it without that jeopardy, you can watch and you can watch them and go, they are actually really quite well organised. I know Lloris pulled up really good, really important saves, and they probably should have been 2 or 3 up by half time with the shots that they'd had. But considering that was 49, 50 minutes of play in that first one-off play, but a 49, 50 minute first half, they came at us and we cleared a lot. There was some cock-ups, like I say, Sessegnon was really uncomfortable in that position and he was getting exposed quite badly. But I thought, as sort of last man or as the back three being organised, I thought when I saw it without that jeopardy, you could kind of see how they are organised to deal with it, you know. And I'm not saying it's a good thing. This is not me because I do think it's a fucking awful way to play football. But you know, if it is the way that he thinks we're going to see the season out, then you know you can see the logic behind it, and you can actually see the work that's gone into making it a feasible tactic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's an element of a result bias here, where we're sort of looking at the end result and going and looking backwards and working backwards in thinking, a bit like conspiracy theorists do, and then just look at it and go, well, actually, I can see what he's doing here. Whereas if it was a crap result and ultimately we were, going into the Europa, we'd be a lot more negative about it. But you have to kind of think. Actually, it was a really intense atmosphere when I was looking at the build up to it. Apart from the fact that those Marseille fans are up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning setting off fireworks outside the hotel, but the whole thing. I mean, there were like flares and fireworks going off outside. There were, it was a really, really raucous atmosphere. So you have to say, I mean, with the best will in the world, even though they are professional footballers, that's got to affect you somehow.
Yeah, I mean it has, and like I say, when I listened to it, when I was listening to the commentary, you could hardly hear the commentators. All you could was the crowd. It was that loud, and you could hear in the mix, the production mix on the radio, how they were trying to readjust everything to make it audible.
Yeah.
They were clearly having a job, making their own people heard above it. So that kind of goes to show, how quite how loud it was.
I mean, there were bangs every now and then, weren't there? Like really loud bangs with sort of explosives and pyrotechnics going off constantly. So it must have been quite an intimidating atmosphere.
Yeah, it must have been, and it'd be interesting to hear the players' perspective on it afterwards. Do they take anything from being able to play in that for 90 something minutes and get a result? I mean, is that kind of character forming once they've come out of it unscathed? Yeah. Well, one of them came out of it unscathed, obviously.
So should we have a quick look at the second half then, where it all turned around and it was like a completely different team that turned up in the second half? There were rumors of I know was it, forgotten his name, Stellini, isn't it? He said that he'd sort of mined his inner Conte and had a rousing speech with them, and I think a few of the players also stood up and just said, "Right, this is it, boys. We've got to go out and do something," and they did. That second half was completely different. What were your thoughts on that?
I mean, the second half was fantastic, wasn't it? From the get-go, we really, really started to impose ourselves on it. Had more time in their penalty area in the first 5 minutes of the second half than we did in the entire first half, and we should have scored a lot more, really, looking at the chances that we created in that second half. We should have been out of sight by the time it got to that last goal. I mean, Kane, obviously there was a disallowed goal as well, but, Kane, he had 2 or 3 where you would expect him. The keeper spilled one, and the keeper just took one away from him. It was a cross from Royale, I think, a low cross. There were 2 or 3 that on any other day of the week, that proactive stance would have really paid off quite effectively, and we'd have been a lot further. So, yeah, I mean, that's the Spurs we want to see, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I thought when we got back into it when about 53rd minute or something like that, wasn't it? When Davies headed that one in. Sorry, Longley, I should say.
Longley, yeah.
And then I thought, we could see this out. We were in the ascendancy. We played much more aggressively. Although talking about aggression, Son had his eyeball practically taken out. I don't know. What do you think on that? Do you think that was a tactic? Do you think they took him out?
Well, I mean, I don't like you say you be careful of conspiracies, don't you? But the thing that struck me was that they did the same thing to Harry Kane in the second half, didn't they? Mm-hmm. So I don't know if it was the same player, but I mean, they were certainly being aggressive.
I think that same player actually got sent off in the first game against us, didn't he? And I think there was a tactic to take Son out there as well. So I mean, I know it looked innocuous, but I'm the conspiracy theorist in me thinks that there was a bit of a tactic to go up and make it look like an accident, because that was pretty. I mean, he's going to have surgery now, isn't he?
Well, I think he's had surgery today, hasn't he?
Mm.
Yeah, I caught a little bit of the press conference earlier, and I think he said he was having surgery today or tomorrow. So,
yeah,
I mean, it's obviously a really, really nasty injury, and like you say, it wouldn't be a surprise if that's what they, not gone out to put him in hospital, but gone out to shake him up.
Mm.
And if you isolate Son from the game, because Kane is very good at dropping deep and bringing the ball out and turning himself from a striker to an advanced midfielder to link up and holding the ball and all of those things. But when you're playing on the break, our pace all comes from Son at the minute, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Game, you really take the counter-attack threat away from us, don't you? Because nobody else has the speed on the break that he has, and if they are mindful of our probable desire to play out quickly on the transition and to hurt them when they're all in advanced positions like they were, then yeah, that's a really, really effective way to nullify that threat.
But it's a bit like that the last game, the Bournemouth game. It felt like the first half we were non-entities. The second half we threw the kitchen sink at it, and we did kind of do that a little bit in this game as well. We seemed to sort of throw everything at it, and it felt like, well, okay, although we'll be happy with the draw, that it was there. We could have taken our chances and won this game. Then of course I know they had a couple of chances. Kolasinac nearly scored.
Yeah.
How the fucking ever scored that, I don't know. But
yeah.
But when the final one went in, the actual winner on right at the end, that was delicious. I mean, like 95th minute, more or less, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, it was. It turned out to be the last kick of the game, didn't it?
Yeah.
And it was beautifully taken, considering that for the 5 minutes prior to that, he looked like he was hobbling around. He wouldn't have run if his life depended on it. And then all of a sudden, I mean, he's not the quickest fella in the world to start with. Or certainly he doesn't give that impression to me. I don't know. Maybe he does cover the ground well, but I mean, he switched it on, and he seemed to have all the time in the world. And it was a beautiful finish.
I mean, at that point when Davis knocked it over to Kane, I just thought he's going to run down the corner here and just try and waste a bit of time because we were that close to the end, weren't we? And then, but then he looked up and he saw Højbjerg sort of sprinting, and I'm thinking he's not going to do that. Even when Højbjerg got it, I thought he was then just going to sort of dance around a bit, maybe pass it backwards and do a bit of Vinny Samways with it. But but then he took it across himself and just absolutely leathered it. And I don't know if it was not particularly good keeping, or whether the keeper was just taken completely unexpected, but it was an absolute rocket, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. I almost feel for him actually that his prior attempt didn't go in. The one that hit the crossbar. I don't know if you saw him strike that. That was a beautifully struck ball as well. With the inside foot, and it was gorgeous. He set himself perfectly for it, and it was one of those. If you put him there 100 times again, I wonder how many times he could actually hit the bar with that shot.
Yeah. Did the VAR affect your celebration though? Did you sort of think temper your celebration?
No, I must admit I'm quite good at forgetting about VAR until it happens. And like I say, I listened to it live on the radio, and the way that the commentary described the goal, it sounded like there was no possibility of it being and so it never even crossed my mind, that was a thing. And I must admit, I always kind of get that, oh, fucking hell, we have to have a check now, don't we?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I was about 40 seconds behind in my stream that I was watching, and a friend of mine just messaged on WhatsApp and just said, like, loads and loads of different keyboards, like it's just going absolutely like mental with the different random letters and things like that. And I'm thinking, we must have scored here. and then I waited 30-40 seconds and saw it go in, and so expecting that's what's happened, and it did look